There
Hey,
we
LA
go.
Progressive friends and family, this is Dick and Sharon reminding you to please subscribe and give us a thumbs up and do all the other stuff like donate if you can. Today, we're so happy to have Mario Solis-Marich join us. Mario is a Latino policy opinion leader in the United States with a strong background in politics, advocacy, radio, television, and the new media. Hey, Mario, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, I guess. How about you two? It's always great to be with you too.
And Mario's also a longtime colleague and friend of ours for more than a decade. So it's so good to see you again, Mario. I'm glad you're doing well.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, Mario, to help us understand what is happening with the Latino community.
You
What
know,
happened?
well, let's. I think that's such a good question. Can we start with a little bit of history just to bring
Yes,
folks up
yes,
to
yes.
date?
So tell us
So,
what you and you have an argument, an article on the LA Progressive, and
yes.
yeah, so tell us. I mean, aside from the fact that you are a Latino, um, but you also have a deep history and understanding the trends that we're seeing right now. So explain it to us.
So let's go back to 1994, right? Well, actually, let's go to 1993. In 1993, and before that, let's take California as the example for LA Progressive. California was almost a 50-50 state, 50% Republican and 50% Democrats, except that Republicans seemed to do better statewide for a couple of reasons. One of which that we had a lot of conservative Democrats. That was number one, and number two is that the way that the election cycles worked, those candidates were favored. So even though we were a 50-50 state, we did actually lean Republican. So in those days, California was considered a Republican state. In 1994, there was a proposition that was put on the ballot, Proposition 187. I want to remind everybody, it was a very significant milestone in the history of California. You could, without a doubt, right, in political California. I want to remind everybody that could bring some solace today is that a good chunk of Latino voters voted for Proposition 187.
They did? I didn't
Yes.
know that.
And people at that time were shocked and were asking, and I was doing work at that time in the community, and people were asking these very same questions like, what happened? How did that happen? Well, about a year into it, as Proposition 187 began to get implemented, and people realized what had really happened, and we had at that time a bank of Latinos that didn't vote and a bank of Latinos that were eligible to be registered that weren't registered. And once it got implemented, and once people saw what it was, they started registering like crazy and voting like crazy, and the state of California has been considered a blue state ever since.
So tell us what was Prop 187?
So basically, Prop 187 was basically made being an undocumented immigrant a crime in the state of California,
There you
right?
go.
Just to put it, and it had a bunch of onerous provisions that eventually were mostly found to be unconstitutional by the state of California, right? Something, right? There was just a mixed bag there as far on the legal end of it. But the thing about it was that the backlash was so strong and so permanent that Republicans could never win California again. But what does that mean? That has huge implications for the Democratic National Committee, for Democrats nationally. Because Democrats, when it comes to time to be president, right, when it comes time to run for president, it's assumed, correctly so, that from 96 forward, or 98 forward, actually it took them a while to realize kind of what happened there, how deep it was that they could count on California. Democrats have been consistently been able to count on California, which is not only significant because the number of electoral votes California has, but super significant because we have three of the most expensive media markets in the country right here in this state. So if this state becomes in play again, the amount of money that is spent nationally on media, half of that would have to be spent here in California by Democrats.
Wow.
Just Yes. So now listen to what I'm saying here, because not too many people say this, but the Democratic Party is in the place it is right now because of Latino voters,
That's right.
Right.
That's
right?
right.
And you could go election cycle after election cycle without anybody ever saying that. And at a certain point, voters feel ignored. At a certain point, voters feel taken for granted. And at a certain point, especially since the party has a horrible record, and of actually talking to, reaching out to, catering to, Latino voters. And we have seen a constant erosion. So, I, you know, uh, without, at the danger of dating myself, right? So at a certain point, nationally, what we knew and state by state is that Democrats used to be able to depend on 72, 73% of the Latino vote. In so much, it was such a factor. It was such a known fact that basically they could fund nonpartisan groups that would basically go out and just register any Latino. They didn't have to be partisan. They didn't have to just focus on on Democrats, right? Because they knew that 70 some percent of that vote was going to be theirs anyway. So it was easy to give money to a nonprofit who didn't have to be partisan, that could go out and just generically, register Latinos, and the math would kind of work out. We saw that go from 73% to 72%. People say, don't worry, it was an anomaly, to 68%. It's a bad year, but it's 68%, 67%, 65. The erosion has been consistent over the last couple of decades. And we've now hit that tipping point. And so that's basically what's happened. So it's a combination of people stayed home, some Latinos stayed home, a lot of and the Latinos that came out are are basically looking at the party and saying, who are you? And what's in it for me? And after being catered year round, catered by the right. And so go ahead.
So one question that I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to date you either, but I'll date me. I actually remember Proposition 187.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you remember when it was, something that we were going to have to, we were being informed about. But I'm asking you, as a Latino man with people in your family who are Latino, aside from what the professionals were saying, what was your gut feeling about Prop 187?
My gut feeling about Prop 187 was that it was going to be horrible, and that it was like a real danger to our community, which unfortunately I was right about. But if you think about it, at that time, I was in a cluster of people that had a lot of information, right? And this was not, there was some Spanish language TV about it. There was very few, and to the date, there's not a lot of TV that caters to Latinos, right? There's not a lot of media that does. And so the information about what it was very, very thin in the community from our side. The other side, of course, was lying about its impact, what the impact would be. Basically, you have nothing to worry about. These people are exaggerating, blah, 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 right? And so but the impact of it was immediate. That's why there's a lot of parallels today. Now, is it going to work out the same? Who knows, right? But when these mass deportations, should they actually start, it's going to be interesting to see how people react to it. It's one thing to be, kind of brave about it. Oh, it's not going to impact me and blah, 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 right? And then when you actually feel the pressure, because as we all know on this call, the pressure is going to be around anybody that looks Latino or anybody who's Latino that has an enemy that just wants to report them, get back at them, and wreak havoc on their lives. I'm sorry, Dick, go ahead.
Oh yes, well, so I've read that there's a trend with Latinos who've been here for they're not newcomers, two, 3 generations. They kind of resent the new immigrants because they compete for jobs or they ruin their reputation. How much of that is a factor?
I haven't seen, I've heard those anecdotes. I haven't seen that as being significantly larger this year or for Latinos than it has been for any other immigrant group. I think right now it's highlighted because of the situation and people are trying to scratch their head. And of course, we have a lot of powerful people who don't want to take the blame for this.
Yeah.
Because let me say again, I haven't said it loud enough. Let me say again, the Democratic Party is reaping what it's sown. It has ignored this community. It has undercut our outreach efforts. And this is what they get. I mean, I hate to say it, but this is you can't just expect people to magically, show up. So I think that there's a lot of people trying to like, oh, blah, blah. But think about that for a second. Like politics, politics is the only business, and I think you two have heard me say this before. Politics is the only business where you blame the consumer for not buying the product. Right. I mean, Intravision and a couple of other entities did a survey of Latino voters. I think they started back in June or right after Kamala announced. I forget, and what they found, like maybe a good 3 or 4 weeks, month into that, the only 30% of regular Latino voters had been contacted by the campaign, right? So there's a and I think you might have heard the stories coming out of Pennsylvania, right? There is a lot, there's a lot there. So yeah, we could do an interview with a few Latinos. I don't know, and there may be many, but I haven't seen the actual numbers to comment on that. But then we have to put it in context. Is it higher than it was for when the Irish were assimilating into this country? Were there people that had been here 2 generations, where as the immigrants continued to flow in, that they were, kind of uncomfortable with that phenomenon? What do we compare that immigrant experience to in the United States?
Well, I can say as the Irish guy in the room that as the Irish gained a foothold and stayed and moved to Staten Island, they became increasingly, some of them became increasingly conservative.
Right.
So the thing about, but we have the discussion about, the Democratic Party has also captured the Black vote since time immemorial. And then we turn around and say, well, how has that helped the Black people? And I'm sure Latinos must have the same feeling. They keep running out and voting for Democrats. And does it really improve their communities? Does it help their kids?
Yeah, I mean, you would think. I mean, listen to the story that we just told. It's like an argument could be made that a good portion of the national Democratic apparatus is dependent on this vote, right? And actually, we may have just seen the evidence of that, or at least the beginning of that, right? You would think that the streets of East LA would be paved in gold at this point, right? And it's like they're but we all know what the reality is. And the reality is that what's happening right now is not working. You have a lot of frustrated people. You have especially a lot of frustrated young men. And when I say young, I'm definitely going to date myself. I mean, under 50.
Right. And they don't even remember Proposition 187.
Exactly.
The other part of my idea is that if you don't study history, you're destined to repeat it. And certainly if you haven't lived long enough to even remember what happened with 187.
And so we definitely have an aspirational streak within the Latino community. There's an entrepreneurial streak. None of those things have been catered to. None of those things have been supported, right? A lot of men in our community don't want to go to college, but some vocational schools, with the way the loans are set up, are just as onerous, right? Comparatively, right? And so like where is that pipeline, right? And now because of technology, things are all changing again, really kind of creating, a level of like, wow, someone's got to do something. And then you have the dynamic of only one side talking to them consistently. So I'm not sure who thought that this could turn out any other way. And there's been a small group of us that have been like predicting this for, a couple of decades. Like, hey, you guys got to pay attention over here, right? And we were always told, next year. I mean, I heard that at one point, a DNC official, basically said, well, we spent 20% more on Latinos this year than this cycle than last cycle. That's inflation.
Yeah.
That's been the rate of inflation in the past 4 years.
That's right. That's absolutely.
And so basically we haven't seen any extra effort. And I think that it's kind of one of the reasons I wrote that piece, and one of the reasons I'm going to be much more active. I kind of took a little bit of a break, and it's like this is that precipice, right? The Latino community really has to decide which way which way it's going to turn. And I know, and thank you for reposting that piece for Latino Voter USA. It's something I'm really proud to be a part of. But that's a centrist site. That's a very centrist site, and it's that way. We have good regular readers that voted for Trump and that told us before they voted for Trump that they were going to vote for Trump. And we're in conversation with progressives and with Trump voters and all that. But what we see is that the progressive, the at least within the Latino community, that it's very common for an individual to have progressive ideals and a very conservative streak, right? That it's a mix, and it doesn't really fall into the ideological spectrum. And so that's why we're really excited about having this very open conversation with them. We're not as big as y'all, but we're going to get there, here in California.
Who's the y'all? Progressives? Black women?
LA Progressive. LAprogressive.com. So, which I'm always proud to be a part of.
Oh, thank you.
But we're very excited about that. The one thing that I'll say that's kind of unique is that in order to become a subscriber on LatinoVoterUSA.com, you have to be a registered voter. Because you may subscribe and you may get a couple of our emails and stuff, but we do drop people who are not. We love having conversations with voters. That's
right. And party affiliation is unimportant. So even people independent.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. Well, but let's be real. We focus on independents and Democrats, right? Right. That's and a lot of our independents are right leaning and vote, Republican, and a lot of our
any Greens.
I'm sure there are. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you just have to be registered.
So your basically push is that you feel the Democratic Party needs to pay a lot more attention to Latinos, which is a little strange here in LA because the Democratic Party is so heavily Latino.
It's not strange. So, when you were saying that, Mario, I thought about what happened with Kevin De Leon here in Los Angeles County City Council, and that very damaging tape that you actually interviewed you afterwards, and we talked about it. And it occurred to me that because the Latino community is really not giving its just desserts, you have situations like what happened there, where they had this sidebar conversation, and they're trying to plan something, because I believe that it is only fair that representation be equally shared or be proportional to the population. If they could have had an open conversation about that, maybe that wouldn't have been driven underground and turned so ugly.
Well, that's a possibility too, but quite frankly, and you know how I feel about that. I was really happy he lost, quite frankly.
I know,
and I think because I think it's important for us to be able to stand, as an example of working together, right? And I think that's kind of what we're also seeing falling apart too, is the value of our coalition has not been explained to younger people.
It
And
hasn't.
once you're right, and the value of it and why we're actually here. But like going back to Dick's point as well, and your point, that like the state legislature, right, has right now this opportunity to say, hey, we need to do some readjustments here, right, as far as what we actually put on our agenda for this year. I have to tell you, I haven't seen it yet. It could be those conversations could be happening behind the scenes or whatever. I mean, I take some solace that Senator Lina Gonzalez is, the majority leader on the Senate side, and and she's bright, and she's, and I know that she gets it. But it takes more than one, regardless of your position over there. And I think that from what I've seen so far, and I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see the signal being received in Sacramento. Well, what we will find out.
So one point that Dick made, he talked about being of Irish descent and how when the Irish first came to the United States, they were considered the other. They weren't
Right.
white. There's stuff that they had to do to become white. And there are people that are talking about how many in the Latino community, because obviously that's not a race, it's an ethnicity. And
Right.
many are white and wanting to do, or at least they're exhibiting behavior that suggests they want to do what the Irish did and become part of the white community and distance themselves from people of color. Now, you said just now that what you feel is important, and I agree with you, is that we establish an understanding of why it's so important that we form these coalitions. Can you just briefly talk about why it's important that people of color unite?
I think it's super important because number one, that's the only way to finally achieve real power. I mean, there's not enough of us, right? I mean, there's enough of us to do damage, but is there enough of us to actually get the changes that we want passionately done? And the answer to that is no. The math just isn't there, right? So if you want to look at it just as a practical point, right? But it's also about a sense of values and morality. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, and I do believe this, and is that we have seen kind of the beginning of an erosion of kind of this of a value-driven system, right? And I think that we have to be the example. If we want a country that really is the United States of America, if we want a really united country, then we have to be a united across communities. I mean, that is, what this country stands for. And so, there's like real numerical reasons to do it, but there's also like very real value reasons to do that. So on both ends, it's really interesting. Take a look at the union movement, or actually, we could do a whole other. I might be writing about this in the future, but I'm not sure. I think we have a bunch of unions right now that are working on their contracts. I'm not sure we have a labor movement anymore, right? Because I think that has unfortunately eroded. But when you look at it, the only way that they have been able to succeed is when they've worked together to defend each other's contracts and to move each other's contracts forward, right? So if one union's by itself, it really is not as powerful, effective as when it's, when the other unions join in. Right. And that's the same for everyday voters, everyday people. In order for us to really progress, we have to, number one, state what we want. We have to work, together and build coalitions and communities. And we have to hold elected officials accountable.
That's right. Well, we at the LA Progressive believe the same thing. And we thank you, Mario, for contributing to the LA Progressive with this great piece that was posted today, California Democrats Latino Voter Challenge, Fire Containment. And as we close, tell us why fire containment?
Because it is smoldering. I mean, we definitely, if you can't see the smoke right now, you're not looking. This is a big wake-up call, a 5-alarm bell, for the Democratic Party. And the question is, are we going to be, as I say in the piece, we better be careful because a gust of wind in the wrong direction could make the state red again.
Yeah, some scary times. Well, thank you, Mario Solis-Marich.
Thank you too. You two are just always great to talk to.
Okay, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.